In business, there's no room for guesswork. Every shipment matters. Every deadline counts. When you're trying to keep operations running smoothly, the last thing you need is uncertainty. That's why reliability is at the core of USPS Ground Advantage. From the moment your package is first scanned in, it moves through a secure nationwide network, aiding in a timely and accurate delivery. You get near real-time tracking so you can keep up with your shipments. And with affordable upfront pricing, there are no hidden fees or surprise surcharges to throw off your cost sheets. It all adds up to predictable deliveries you can depend on. Because knowing your logistics are handled lets you focus on everything else: your customers, your team, and the future you're building. Visit USPS.com/Ground Advantage to start shipping with confidence. USPS, official shipping sponsor of the NHL.
This is VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
This is Money Moves on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
The NFL draft quickly approaches. Let's take a little bit more of a microscopic look, a deep look at some of these teams, specifically the Carolina Panthers, a popular team here on this program. Stormy Buonantony used to work for the team. Her husband is from Carolina. So let's welcome in Mike Kaye, who's nice enough to give us some time. Panthers Reporter, Charlotte Observer is the spot at Mike_E_K, K-A-Y-E, joins us now. Mike, we appreciate the time. So I wanted to start big picture first before we zoom in on what the Panthers' plans are here. But this is going to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, General Manager Dan Morgan's third draft now that he is in control of. What have we learned from the way this front office operates for the first two drafts, and what are some of the maybe not giveaways, but some of the tells, some of the things they like to rely on at this time of year, or is everything up for grabs for this front office?
Well, they certainly like wide receivers. They've drafted a wide receiver in the last two first rounds. Some would argue that one went really right and one went really wrong. They obviously drafted Tetairoa McMillan, the reigning Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL. And then they've got Xavier Legette, who has struggled and might be on the hot seat when it comes to starting for the Panthers this year, especially if they draft another wide receiver this year.
So as you look at what this team's needs are with a first-round pick, how would you rank positional needs for Carolina heading into Thursday?
Well, I think safety is at the top of the list. They would like to get another playmaking wide receiver. I think defensive line is a big underlying need, but I don't think they view anybody as a surefire first-round pick at that position. Inside linebacker could use some help. Center can use some help. Offensive tackle is a long-term need with Rasheed Walker on a one-year deal and Ike Ekwonu coming off patellar surgery. So they have some pretty big needs. But I think they feel pretty comfortable in fielding a roster right out of what they've done in free agency because they re-signed 12 players. They signed a bunch of players on one-year deals. And as, you know, I mean, the headliners, Jalen Phillips and Devin Lloyd, have been brought in to enhance outside linebacker and inside linebacker, respectively.
Is this a group that you think would be willing to move up, move down? Would they get aggressive? Because interestingly enough, when you go through their team needs, in the betting market at least, the favorite of the first drafted player by position is offensive lineman for the Carolina Panthers. I know you listed them among some of the many needs here, but would they be aggressive if there is an offensive lineman they want or a player that they want? Would they move up from 19? Because you're pretty stuck with the way the board's going to fall, obviously being so far back down in the first round.
I mean, I think they would be. They have been aggressive in past years. If you remember last year, they traded up with both picks on day 2 to get Nick Scordon and Prince Umanmielen. The year before that, they traded up into the first round to get Xavier Legette. Then they traded back to get an extra second-round pick for last year during the 2024 draft and eventually traded up to get Jonathan Brooks. So they've worked the board, but I don't think they want to give up 2027 picks because that draft is considered to be a lot more talented than this one. If they were to go up, I think it would have to be for pick swap value solely based on that.
So if you go to the Charlotte Observer, you can check it out, sign up, and you can see where Mike has some of his mock draft that is up right now. In the most recent one, you did switch from your previous mock draft. You went offensive lineman in the previous one, but they went defensive backfield in your most recent. Why the change, and who do you have them taking?
Well, I think adding Rasheed Walker gives them the insurance that they need in case the offensive tackle they want isn't there. Dylan Thieneman is a guy who I really like. He can play the post safety. He can work the box. He can play nickel. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife in a similar regard to Trevon Merrick, only a much better player in coverage, and I think the two of them would fit in very well in Ejiro Evero's defense. You could disguise a lot of looks. Dylan can match up against wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, you name it, and he is a premium prospect at a non-premium position. I think when you're picking outside the top 15, that allows you to kind of spend on non-premium positions. And he's a guy that I think is, of the, outside of Caleb Downs, is the most talented safety in the class. And I think if the Panthers want to bring in somebody who's dynamic, not necessarily at the most important position, but somebody who could change their defense, he makes a lot of sense.
When you look at the offensive lineman potentially they could target in your the mock draft prior to this one, you had Monroe Freeling, the selection. Is that a guy specifically they like? Was that just an offensive lineman you thought would be available? Do you have some names that maybe they were specifically looking at, or just guys that fit the archetype that Canales wants along that offensive line?
Well, I think they want athletes. Like, that's what they want. They favor long-limbed guys that don't have a lot of habits built in. Monroe Freeling obviously has been a starter in college for a major college program, but he doesn't have a ton of experience, doesn't have a ton of lumps. I think somebody like Spencer Fanu or Caleb Lomu from Utah, like those guys make sense because they're moldable. They can play multiple positions. They're interesting from an athletic standpoint. Caden Proctor's a guy that I really like. I don't know how much they would have interest in him, but he's more of a road grader. He's not like those other three where they're more finesse athletes. And so maybe he's a guy that they would like. They do have an offensive line coach who almost exclusively coaches up their tackle group, Joe Gilbert. They've got Harold Goodwin, who coaches up the interior offensive line. And I think when you have that one-on-one coaching and a young, moldable tackle talent in a draft that's not particularly good, I think that's appealing.
Mike Kaye with us again, Charlotte Observer, Carolina Panthers beat writer, going over what Carolina might do here in the draft, get to the offseason as well, which, at least by my measure, seemed to be pretty impressive for Carolina. All right, wide receiver, if they decide to go in this direction, what archetype of player are they looking at wide receiver?
Well, I think you have to look at guys that are not like Tetro McMillan and Jalen Coker. Those guys win above the rim. They're guys that use their size well. I think you need a speedy guy who can either get yards after the catch or spread the defensive secondary. And two guys that make a lot of sense who have also met with them are Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M and Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. I really like Omar Cooper Jr. just from a yards after catch standpoint. He's got a toughness to him. He's not afraid to go across the middle. If he's in the slot, you can move Coker to his more natural Z position. He's a guy who runs angry after the catch. I'm a little concerned about Casey Concepcion's drop history, but he's also a guy that if he's pushing downfield, running go routes, I think you feel pretty good about targeting down the field.
One of your other changes is in the late rounds, Luke Altmaier was a selection for Carolina. In those late rounds, do you think that quarterback could still be an option for them, taking one of these late kind of developmental pieces that could go behind Young?
Well, I don't think they're itching for it, but I do think they would like to bring in a younger guy. I mean, a Haynes King, a Luke Altmaier, those guys make sense as long-term projects, but I'm sure they probably hope that they're going to be able to get one of those guys as an undrafted free agent. I spoke with Dave Canales in Arizona during the owners' meetings, and he wasn't particularly in a rush to get one of those guys, though I do think it's time for them to develop a cheap backup behind Bryce Young right now. Kenny Pickett is taking up a chunk of their salary cap. He's a one-year fix. We'll see where it goes from there.
So what's your read on Young and how the team feels about him? He's obviously improved as it's gone along. It's not particularly explosive what we have seen from him, but improvement can't be denied as his career's gone along. So what do you think the long-term play is here for Bryce Young as we've watched him now after his third season?
I mean, this is his fourth year of a tryout. I think unless he's willing to take a below-market contract, they really need to see what they have in him. We just saw Will Anderson, the third overall pick in the draft, the same draft, get market correcting money. I mean, insane cash. I mean, the quarterback position's next. And, the Panthers might be in a rush to get ahead of C.J. Stroud, but right now C.J. Stroud's not negotiating against a great finish to his season either. So I think Bryce is a wait and see. I think they love him for right now. If he can continue to perform the way he did in the second half of last season, then he's positioned himself in a really good spot to get paid.
So what'd you make of their offseason as a whole? Because tying this into Bryce, I mean, obviously quarterback development is paramount no matter what, but given the offseason it seems that they had, like this is a pretty strong one in an open division that if he hits or if you could figure that out, this all seems like it's going to work out for them as being a very effective team. But what'd you make of their offseason and where this team is at heading into 2026?
Well, they feel really good about Jalen Phillips. They feel really good about Devin Lloyd. Both of those guys upgrading two major positions for them. And I think they like the known depth that they brought back. I think they do have spots where they feel like they need to clean up immediately, but for the most part, they feel like they've improved over last year's roster.
Yeah. By the way, since you are out there in Charlotte, this is, as I mentioned at the top, a Pro Charlotte show, not just from a Panthers perspective. Was everybody as heartbroken as we were about the Hornets and the way that they flamed out in the postseason?
I mean, I think they made strides, but yeah, it was probably a disappointing end to the whole campaign.
Yeah. Mike Kaye, again, Carolina Panthers, Charlotte Observer. Also, make sure you check out Processing Blue Panthers podcast as well. Mike, we appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, you got it. The Carolina Panthers picking, by the way, if you don't know off the top of your head, 19th overall just behind the Minnesota Vikings. And again, the position of value and what we're going to look at betting market-wise at the very least, offensive lineman plus 275, wide receiver at 3-1. You got the group chat. You got the opinions. Now put your money where your mouth is. Cut is the social betting platform that lets you bet directly against your friends and other users on sports, politics, pop culture, even personal bets. Every bet is fully customizable and pre-funded, so nobody flakes when they lose. Plus, you can get cash back on every single bet you make. Use promo code VSIN to get a 20% deposit bonus on your first deposit. Download Cut today, KUTT.com, or in the App Store and use promo code VSIN. General Manager Dan Morgan is in his third offseason right now and his third draft for the Carolina Panthers. That's why I wanted to ask, too, about the history of what this team has done, because from a positional standpoint, wide receiver has been one, but they arguably still need another. But using a third straight first-round pick on a pass catcher like that, probably unlikely. And given the Band-Aid that they have in offensive line, looking at defensive back potentially in that market for the Carolina Panthers with their first pick might be something worth looking at. Defensively, it makes some sense. They invested in the offseason in Phillips, as we discussed, from an edge rusher standpoint, but you can really improve on a team that at times had given up some big plays on the back end. They were a pretty solid group, man. We talked about them a lot on those Live Bet Sunday shows, and improving that end. You can find wide receiver depth a little bit later in the draft, but looking outside of those top two options for you in the betting market seems like maybe the way to go when you start to read between the lines of what the Carolina Panthers have in store for them in this draft coming up later in the week. All right, when we come back, I think we're going to connect with our own Stormy Buonantony. We'll see what she's got going on. I believe Dallas is the spot tonight, so yes, she's out in Dallas. We'll discuss that Star Series. I think it's really interesting. A lot of deep dives into the metrics, tells you a pretty interesting story about Game 1. We'll see if she sees the same thing when we come back. So you're listening to this podcast because you want an edge. But what if I told you you're only halfway there? You've got the mindset. Now it's time to get the toolkit to match. Here's the thing. Pro bettors spend thousands on data and tools, but what they don't want you to know is that you can get the same edge for a fraction of the cost with VSIN Pro. VSIN Pro gives you access to expert picks, public betting data, prop projections, powerful tools, analytics, and more. Just tap the link in the description and see why thousands of bettors are already using VSIN Pro to cash more bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSIN, the Sports Betting Network.
From ringside out in Sin City to now out in Dallas as we prepare for a second contest between the Stars and the Wild, we head out to the Progressive Guest Line and welcome in Stormy Buonantony, alleged host of Money Moves here on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, usually in this chair here, but a little bit farther away today. How we doing, bud?
Alleged. Come on now. Come on. No, I'm doing well, though. Thank you. I appreciate it. I was actually just telling you in the commercial break, but my travel overnight, which I know you love hearing so much about, was a bit of a bear. Working the Vegas Golden Knights Utah game yesterday and now being in Dallas today. I had a red eye last night that got delayed on the tarmac for about 3 hours. So not ideal, but still really excited for tonight's game and see what we get. Yeah, like you said, in game 2, can Dallas bounce back?
I do want to obviously get to that because as I've been teasing toward our spot with you, I thought looking at the numbers from game one, there's an interesting story to tell. We'll see. But the game you were at last night, any big takeaways as Vegas gets a win over Utah in a pretty strong fashion for the most part in a series that I know we have discussed and with others, many thought the Mammoth, and they still could be pretty competitive in a set like that.
Sure. I think that was a great example of just playoff hockey, right? It was hard hitting. It was chippy, guys physically fighting and jawing at each other. I don't know if you saw the video that went a little bit viral last night of Nick Dowd saying some words to Logan Cooley. And even with 6 goals ended up being scored, there's the empty net goal at the end, but it had the lower scoring feel until Vegas kind of unloaded the clip. And you mentioned us thinking this series could go a little bit longer and Utah being competitive. I'll give Utah credit. So much of the conversation around this series was kind of Vegas experience and Utah's youth. They did not back down one bit. They led for a good portion of the game yesterday. You could tell over the course of 3 periods, Vegas did out physical them a bit. Their size wore the Mammoth down. But they also weren't going to sit there and just let Vegas bully them. I was pretty impressed with how they held their own, and I think that can go a long way as they try to extend this series.
Adjusted series price, Vegas, right around like a $3 favorite. Depends where you look, minus 290 to minus 320, depending on the shop that you're looking at. So, all right, let's get to the game and the series that you are on here. Let's go back to game one. So I keep talking about this. One of the things that I thought stuck out when you go back to game one is statistically, it wasn't a dominant performance by Minnesota, even though the final scoreboard indicated as such. If you look at like high danger chances, shot share, things like that, expected goals, it was actually a lot tighter, Stormy. When you looked at this, did you get the same sense? And is that what maybe some of these guys are thinking as they head into game two?
I would think so. Something that I feel like instantly when you see a result as lopsided as it is, you instantly go to goaltending and you look at Jake Ottinger and think, oh, well, he must have sucked. And I don't necessarily think that was the case. Maybe it was amplified a little bit by how good Jesper Wallstedt looked on the other side. Curious, like who, like, the thought process, by the way, from John Hines, we're going to talk to him a little bit later on really having no problem about putting the young guy in over Philip Gustafsson. But getting back to Ottinger, it was minus 2.5 expected goals. I understand that. But the Kaprizov goal was just an insane shot. The Eriksson goal was a bang, bang play. And I don't think the guys in front of him in a lot of areas did him a whole lot of favors. I'm curious from an eye test perspective, because obviously like you're better at the analytics and the deep dives on the numbers. For me, from an eye test perspective, it just seemed like Dallas didn't have the horses, and maybe that's a little bit of a reality check coming into today for Dallas. They did get Miro Heiskanen back, and maybe even just that first game back kind of messed up the D pairs a little bit. I'm sure there's an embarrassment factor to the way they lost on home ice as well. I could see a chip on the shoulder type of an attitude today. But you tell me, metrics-wise, what did your numbers show?
So I thought, to the point of Ottinger, was actually one of the things that I wrote down. And again, these are pretty hardcore, but it depends on what you like. He turned away 3 high danger chances, which is good for him, but he gave up 2. And then another was what's considered a low danger chance goal that he allowed. So kind of give up a softie. But otherwise, if you look at the chances that Minnesota had and just how it played out, like expected goals for, it was essentially 1.6 to 1.3. That's obviously nowhere near what the final score was. You look at the high danger chances in totality, 6-4 in favor of Minnesota. So it's not like Dallas was giving up a ton. So if Ottinger just kind of locks in a little bit more like we expect him to, or like we know he can, and Dallas continues to play the way they can defensively, I would expect a little bit of a bounce back here. They're up to like $1.33 favorite. We know you can't make picks, but it does make sense that the market thinks after closing minus 127 in the last game and looking at the way it played out that you would expect Dallas could bounce back tonight.
Absolutely, and they're certainly capable. And fun fact, Dallas has a lot of history coming back from going down early in series. They been to the Western Conference Final each of the last 3 years, JVT, but they're 1-7 in game ones at home in that span. Getting down early in a series is not unique. They have proven to work their way out of it more often than not. I even think specifically to last year, they lose a 5-1 game 1 to Colorado. They win the next 2 in the series. And so I would not be surprised at all if Dallas bounces back today. And as I mentioned, I'm excited to talk to some of the coaches and players when I get over to the arena a little bit later.
So one of the series that you had mentioned on Friday that you had some interest in from a series result standpoint was Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but game one goes in your favor. The Flyers take a 1-0 series lead over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Kind of not a boring game, but like no real big edge between the two when you watch them play, and even in the stat sheet it plays out. How do you feel after game one? And Ed, did you take anything away from game one as you push this forward to game two? We're going to get this tonight.
Feels good. Good start to mine and Mike Palm's series bet at the plus 140 because obviously those numbers are not there anymore. I loved the fans too with their little I don't want to say little and demean it. The 3.8% shirts out there, loud and proud, their postseason chances a couple months ago. No, I was impressed with what I saw. And of course it was the rookie Porter Martone too with the eventual game winner. We talked about him in our series preview that the 19-year-old has provided such a spark for this team. And I thought that was really important for them to show that the moment wasn't too big and said he was big in the moment. Vladar and net didn't have to face a lot. So I'm curious what that's going to look like moving forward in the series. Just 17 shots on goal, stopped 15 for the first postseason win of his career. It looked like, to me, the Pens had trouble sustaining pressure. And considering they're the third highest scoring team in the league, I thought we'd see a little bit more of an offensive game. So it wouldn't surprise me if we continue to see competitive, close games down the stretch, but I expect more offense from Pittsburgh here. So I'm excited to see how this series goes along. I have the Penguins in 6.
You were working.
I mean, not Penguins, excuse me. The Flyers in 6.
Flyers, yeah, Freudian slip. You were working, and this game was right on right before you. Did you get to see what happened in the Sabres and Bruins game?
So this is what stinks at times about doing my job. Like, I didn't get to, yes, I saw, but I didn't get to feel it the way everybody else was feeling it in the moment. And it's funny because I wrapped up a hit that I had to do, and I have my headset on, and Bob Wischusen, who was the play-by-play for my game last night, he, in the commercial break, is talking about Jeremy Swayman pitching a shutout, and then almost right away after he said it, Tage Thompson scored that first goal to kind of put a crack in the armor. And then I'm following on my phone, Tage Thompson scores another goal, and when it rains, it pours, 4 unanswered, and I can only imagine, and I watched the highlights back this morning, but I can only imagine in real time what KeyBank Center felt like. It had to be bonkers just to feel that momentum shift in the arena for those fans.
All right, we do have to make sure we get this because we do get a series getting started tonight between Anaheim and Edmonton. Right now, Edmonton's about $1.76 favorite at circa, total 6.5, shaded to the over. Is this just as easy as it looks? Is this going to be a high-scoring series? What's your expectation for these two?
It better be. I see this thing being high scoring on both sides of it, but Edmonton getting the better of them. I love the Oilers in game one at home. You can bet them any which way. Puck line, team total over. I feel like, and we talked about this with Mike Palm on Friday as well, this is just such a good matchup, it seems like, on the surface for Edmonton, especially the way Anaheim has been reeling down the stretch. We know defensively they're bad. They're bottom 4 in goals against. Their PK's bottom 6. Taking on an Oilers team that's top 6 in scoring. Best power play by margin in the league. Ducks won just 2 of their last 11 games, JVT. One of which was their last game of the regular season against Nashville, in which they still gave up 4 goals. Like, all 3 of the games in the regular season were high scoring, 7-4, 6-5, 4-2. I think we get goals. I know we're still waiting to find out on Leon Draisaitl and what his availability is. He's technically a game time decision. He didn't skate at the optional this morning, but I think that does make a difference to me. Not enough to say I don't want to take Edmonton. I think that this is theirs, and they're going to come out explosive. But I'm curious to see whether or not we get Draisaitl tonight or in the coming games of the series.
All right, so 4 games tonight. Stormy Buonantony with us. I believe, hypothetically, I believe the term was used. She'll be back tomorrow to join us to see what's going. What are you at tomorrow?
That's the plan. Yes, I'm headed over to Denver after the game. Right. I have to fly in the morning, but Denver, LA tomorrow.
I have, in our last 45 seconds with you, I have a bet in hockey today. Would you care to want to guess which side I have bet today in hockey?
I genuinely have no idea. What?
Carolina, baby. the soft Euros. We'll discuss a little bit more.
Stop putting that evil on me. That was not me. That was Mike. And before I go, real quickly, I do want to just publicly say congratulations on the Spartan race. That medal, I'm so proud of you. You really did the thing. End of this week, 75 hard completed. You're a stud.
I know. We're almost there. Come on. I can see the pizza. I can smell it already. Stormy, appreciate it. Safe travels. Have a good call tonight, bud.
Hypothetically, see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, hypothetically. Don't count on it. All right, we come back. We have more to get to. Baseball, hockey, and the rest in our last 30 minutes here on Money Moves.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Let's add some context to what we were talking about with Stormy Buonantony. Big thanks to Storm for joining us. Should be with us tomorrow. Jet setting all around. Vegas last night, Dallas today, Denver tomorrow. Should be back in studio on Wednesday, I believe. But either way, we'll talk a little bit more about hockey with her mañana. We do have a couple of games that I wanted to hit on here from a hockey perspective. So full disclosure about how I kind of do this. I like hockey and playoffs as everybody else does. Best postseason in the world. It is very entertaining. Yesterday, the Sabres game was absolutely ridiculous. Juxtaposed with a boring day in the NBA for the most part outside of the Orlando Magic pulling an upset off against the Detroit Pistons. A ton of fun to watch that go down. And the night's game was particularly entertaining, too, from a local perspective. But there's a couple of games, and the way that I like to do these is similar to what we're talking about with the NBA. I do like, once the series start, to play on the adjustments and look at how these games went, maybe kind of zigzag a little bit, I guess, or just really playing on what you see from Game 1 and building on it for Game 2, and as you go on in the series, Game 2 to Game 3, and so on. So I want to start with the Carolina series because, as I mentioned with Stormy, I did bet Carolina on the money line here against Ottawa. $1.48 is the price you see up on your screen if you're watching up at VSiN.com. We saw this open minus 143 in favor of Carolina. Game 1, Hurricanes actually got bet against a little bit here at Circa. Opened up Carolina minus 150. Closed Hurricanes as a $1.37 favorite. They end up getting the result they need. Game goes under the total. But I thought the Game 1 result was a little bit more deceiving and probably should have been a little bit more lopsided in favor of Carolina. Corsi for percentage, a shot share well in their favor. High danger chances doubled up the Ottawa Senators in that one, 11-5. And all these numbers that I'm reciting to you, too, are all on even strength. So it eliminates everything you saw in terms of power play, penalty kill, as obviously most of the game is played 5-on-5. Really like to lean on these numbers to get an idea of how these are going to play out as you move forward. Carolina dominated that from that perspective. Even expected goals for 3.2 will round up to 1.3. Every number indicated that Carolina was skating circles around this Ottawa team, and I expect that can be the same as we move forward. We had talked about this a little bit with Dennis Bernstein last week. I brought this up with Stormy. The shortcomings of the Hurricanes have obviously been a little bit later in the postseason, but after I look at Game 1 and watch that and see what they did statistically, I feel fairly confident that maybe the market not giving them a fair shake, and maybe they should be priced a little bit higher here against Ottawa. So we'll see if the market moves against them again, but Carolina is a $1.50 favorite. That was playable, so have Carolina today to take a 2-0 series lead over the Ottawa Senators after a dominant performance there in Game 1. Rolling through some of the numbers and where we're at, for those who haven't been keeping track of the betting market today, we'll start at the 4 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Current numbers right now, Circa is $1.47 on the Penguins, plus 132 coming back on Philly. 6 is the total, shaded to the over at minus 115. We saw this open as $1.51 in favor of the Penguins, so a little bit of an adjustment toward the Philadelphia Flyers. Total at 6 to the over at minus 115 on the overnight. It's exactly where we're at right now. So no real move. Slight move toward the Philadelphia Flyers. An interesting game because no real big statistical edge for either of these teams. Shot share was generally positive in favor of Pittsburgh, but still, generally even, slightly in favor of Pittsburgh. High danger chances. Philadelphia won it. It was 6-5. Wasn't really that many high danger chances out there to be had. Both teams largely ineffective when it came to their power plays in that Game 1 as well. It combined 0-5. Pittsburgh had more bites at it, still go 0-3, generated 2 high danger chances in the 3 power plays that they had. And that was Philly. And then Pittsburgh 0-2 with just 1 high danger chance forced in the span of the 2 power plays that they had. I do wonder, and Stormy brought this up because it's easy to just go, hey, goaltending. You do wonder if maybe there is a chance that we can get a higher scoring game here in Game 2. First off, if there are power plays, you would assume that maybe you're not going to have the same inefficient offensive showings on a penalty as you did in the first game for both teams. The other is specifically Skinner, and we didn't have time for this. I wanted to ask Stormy about this, but just the goaltending in general. Skinner for Pittsburgh, 3 goals allowed on 20 shot attempts. It's an .850 save percentage. Why that matters for the season, he was a sub-90 save percentage guy, 292 goals against. In April, it was 87 and the 357 goals against. So there has been some subpar play in between the pipes for Pittsburgh. Vladar was fine, 2 goals allowed, only 17 shot attempts. So are you going to face that small amount of shot attempts here? And if you don't, then all of a sudden you get more scoring opportunities, some poor play from Skinner, and maybe you get a higher scoring game between these two. We'll see. Again, it was just a thought to throw out there, and we'll see if we have that come to fruition. But either way, an interesting game and an even series, it would seem, between these two. In depth for Dallas and Minnesota as Stormy is there. And just we're pointing out, Edmonton opens up a $1.60 favorite here at Circa, 6.5 over -115. Current number right now, Edmonton, $1.76. Plus 158 coming back, 6.5 shaded to the over at -135. So a good push to the over and a pretty decent push of about 16 cents in favor of the Oilers in this Game 1 matchup against the Anaheim Ducks. Ducks defensively, if you look at their last 10 games at even strength, haven't been playing particularly well on that end of the ice. So with that, let's transition over. We got a lot left on the bone when it comes to basketball, but we do have a big baseball card as well, so let's do it. All right, I have a couple of things listed here that we wanted to hit today, but definitely want to hit on this one. Again, kind of falling in the wheelhouse of what do I look at handicapping baseball, and will it really work out or not? We will see. But Michael McGreevy is going to get the start for the St. Louis Cardinals today, so let's talk about this one. Interesting start to the season for McGreevy. Over 4 starts in 21 2/3. He has been pitching well from a results standpoint. 2.49 ERA over the course of 21 2/3. But you know where we're going with this. Generally, how we do it is you're looking for discrepancies. You're looking for issues in some of the numbers. Dig under the hood a little bit. You see a 7.44 expected ERA from McGreevy, 4.24 fielding independent as well. So every sign that maybe you're getting a little bit lucky here. So where is it at? Well, there's a couple of things that really stick out from McGreevy. First of which is insanely lucky so far on balls in play. A 188 batting average on balls in play for McGreevy through these 4 starts. Not something that one would assume is sustainable over the course of a larger sample size, and sample size is growing. It's a 5th start here for McGreevy. So can Miami make him pay here in this start, considering how lucky he has been up to this point? The other thing that you look at, strikeout numbers aren't really there for McGreevy. If you look at the strikeout rate through these 4 starts, striking out just 14% of the batters he has faced here. And all of this, despite the fact that he has given up 10 barrels over the course of these 4 starts, or a barrel rate of just over 14%. We can actually say it's 15. It's 14.9% at this point. So what does it all mean? Well, high barrel rate. You're getting really lucky, though, despite the fact that you have a high barrel rate on balls in play. You're not getting guys to swing and miss. I'm going to assume that McGreevy's not going to be able to keep this up, and I think that's worth looking at playing against him. Now, on the other side, you do have to have 2 to tango. Well, you do have Meyer here, who has pitched pretty well. The issue for Meyer up to this point in his starts has been his command. Walk issue has been pretty high so far, walk rate has been pretty high. Issuing walks at a 10.2% rate. Strikeout rate is fine, just above average. He's floating around like 23%, we'll call it here. Not giving up a ton of hard contact. He's giving up some. He's going to be about an average pitcher, but still has probably deserved more up to this point. The 4.12 ERA, but the 3.79 FIP. Expected fielding independent of 3.86. The expected ERA is above 5. Ties a lot into the contact numbers. They don't really like some of the hard contact that he's allowed, but do think that if you combine these 2 things together, that St. Louis with McGreevy out there is probably due for a little bit of a step back, and McGreevy might be one guy to play against here. So the betting market, we saw this open up in favor of Miami at -126. We're still floating in that range. Circa on the opener was -136, though, and adjusted it down to about -128. I think it's a fair price on Miami. So that'll be part. We'll have best bets coming up here in a little bit. I'll add that to the doc. I didn't throw this in there. I apologize. But Miami tonight will be a play against St. Louis, given the process that I like to have here, looking for some of the discrepancies in some of the pitchers, and McGreevy was one of those guys that I thought definitely was worth playing against. Now, as far as the rest of these series concerned, high leverage series for a couple of these. Let's go to the Philadelphia Phillies taking on the Chicago Cubs. Fun pitching matchup here. Colin Ray is going to get the start for the Cubs, a opposes one Aaron Nola. Ray, up to this point on the season, this will be his second start, fifth appearance, 17 and two-thirds so far. What you see is what you get with Ray, 363 and a 359 in terms of the ERA and the fielding independent. What we have seen so far in these outings for Ray as well, when he has come in here, they have been lengthy. You look at his last two outings, 5 and 6 respectively. He's pitched pretty well, all of them on the road, so he's back home here against Philadelphia. You get a sense of the weather as well, total 7.5, slightly shaded to the over at minus 115. On the other end, we get Nola getting the start for the Phillies. That's always going to be an adventure. Nola's kind of been, for the most part, all over the place. Sports a 4.03 ERA coming into this thing over the course of 22 and a third. Can make the argument it's probably due for a little bit of positive regression. Strikeouts have been there. Command has actually been a little bit better than a season prior. So, too, has been the issues with the home run that he faced a season ago. If you can get those balls in play to stop going, barrel rate's pretty strong, at least in terms of for a pitcher. He's not giving up a ton of barrels. Hard contact solid as well. Would probably look in the direction of Philly. Again, I didn't think it was priced to the point where it's worth jumping on the Philadelphia Phillies. We saw this open minus 112 in favor of Philly. Market has deemed that the Cubs, probably with Ray out there and more consistent, deserves to be favored, but not a big swing. Minus 112 in favor of Philly on the overnight. Minus 112 now in favor of Chicago. And then last but not least, they lost the series over the weekend. We'll have a little bit more on this in the recap, but might as well mention that the Angels do have a big series here in this set against the Toronto Blue Jays. So Angels, we'll see if they can keep up the power, but this is going to be a big start against Toronto. We'll have more details on that coming up in a little bit. Sharps Invitational, though, is a season-long NFL bankroll tournament. Think poker meets football. Start with 10,000 chips, put them to work on spreads, totals, parlays, and even props. Compete for real money. 3 tiers, 3 champions, 3 prize pools worth playing for. Sign up today at jointhesharps.com. That's jointhesharps.com.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
I got a lot of musts every single day, okay? I got to go work out, right? You got to do other things every single morning, and I have to listen to 2 things. Harvard Handicappers and the Daily Diamond. Do it every single day. Check out the VSiN Daily Diamond. Sharp daily baseball betting insight all season long. Former MLB pitcher, our guy, Jensen Lewis, Dave Ross. Break it all down. Lines, totals, props, futures. Subscribe to the VSiN Daily Diamond, wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, search VSiN for our full podcast lineup. Everything from the NBA, Harvard Handicappers, I just mentioned, college sports, the college football betting podcast, where Tim Murray, who joined us early in the program, does. The horse racing and more. VSiN is the Sports Betting Network. Yeah, it's good. I love a good daily breakdown. That's one of the things I think is missing in the podcast space, a lot of daily stuff on some of these sports. So, of course, Daily Diamond scratches that itch. Make sure you check it out wherever you get your pods. We'll get back to baseball in just a brief moment, but we'll go to best bets first because we got to recap the weekend and get into what we have today. And if we have time, we will. We'll get into some of the other baseball games that we have and some of the series that have yet to be resumed in the NBA. I'm getting excited. All right, let's start with the weekend recap. For Stormy, nothing. She does have some pending bets, so we'll go straight to me. Weekend was a split. Warriors plus 3.5. They did not get there. They lost, fizzled out. Steve Kerr in the huddle telling Draymond and Steph, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I love you guys. And the Angels money line minus 128. What a game. Soriano again over the weekend. Friday night it was. Absolutely dominant once more for the Angels. And we didn't hit on this on Friday either, but a charge spot, too, emotionally for the Anaheim Angels out there on Friday night. So a big one for Anaheim. They get the win. Weekend series does not go their way either, but still Soriano continues to dominate and really is making a strong early season push, of course, for the American League Cy Young. 5 starts this season, a 0.28 ERA for Jose Soriano. What a start to the season, and we will see if he can keep that up. But really good performance for Anaheim. It was fun watching it out there, and, of course, celebrating the life of Garrett Anderson, who passed away on Friday, which was tough for the Angels, a 2002 World Series hero for that. All right. With that, the plays for today will start in the NBA. We opened the show with this, but worth recapping from a sense of why we like this or why I like this. Raptors and Cavs, the number at the play was under 223.5. Current number right now, we'll get it for you right now. Think up to 222.5 is playable. We're also probably going to get this buyback here. It's down to 221.5 at this point right now. But I think there's a couple of things right now for the Raptors and Cavs that you can play under. And even 221.5 might be the very edge of why you wanted to play this under the total. But there's a few reasons. The first of which is, again, with the thought of playing against some of these adjustments, the adjustment from game 1 to game 2 from a total standpoint. Game 1 closed at 217.5. We opened this thing up at 224.5. The possessions weren't really there. It was actually a somewhat slow game when you looked at the total possessions, about 98 for both teams. So you're not getting this up and down affair. It's a pretty average game in terms of pace and tempo. The efficiency was ungodly for both teams, and that game ended up going over on Saturday. Raptors, they combined 27 of 44 at the rim and from beyond the arc. Their above the break threes were crazy. We saw Scotty Barnes hit a couple of those at the beginning of the game. It's not a team that shoots as well as they did in that game. You expect some natural regression, but 61% in the two key areas of the floor combined for Toronto. Cavaliers themselves went 16 of 32 from beyond the arc. We saw Donovan Mitchell and James Harden both go 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. We saw Max Strus go 4 of 6. That's likely not going to happen again, at least that level of efficiency from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the other thing that I think is going to be really important, they were calling everything in the first half, yet a combined 63 free throw attempts between the two teams in game 1. I would expect that does not happen again. So Raptors, Cavs under the 223.5, 221.5 is a predominant number. Would expect some buyback too, as we generally get it. 222 still available at a couple of spots, and DraftKings still at 222.5. I think those are definitely still playable at that number of 222.5. So Cavs, Raptors under 223.5, the play there. Also on the card for me here in terms of best bets, we'll go Hurricanes, money line, minus 150 today against the Ottawa Senators. Dipped the toe to the hockey betting. Again, talking about the 5-on-5 play for Carolina. I thought they dominated them, and then you look at the actual breakdown of them statistically. Shot share, high danger chances, expected goals, all well in favor of Carolina. Hockey can be stupid, as can any of these other sports in terms of variance in the way that it's played. But I would expect that Carolina can, again, dominate to that performance, or show that performance again against Ottawa, get this thing done. I really like this team. I liked them last year, though, and they ultimately flamed out. But I do think, at least in this first round, you can trust them. They have a large sample size that tells us that's the case. And then in Major League Baseball, as we just discussed a couple of minutes ago, we'll play against McGreevy and the Cardinals here. Marlins, money line, minus 126 today against the St. Louis Cardinals. Crew, thank you very much for turning that around. I know I put that in late. So, Raptors, Cavs under 223.5. Hurricanes, money line, minus 150. Marlins, money line today, minus 126. For those who are wondering, the pending bets on the series so far, Knicks, minus 1.5 games. And how about this? I told Zach on Friday, Justin, you weren't here. I had been begging Zach Cohen, you don't want FOMO. Josh Hart to lead the series of rebounds at 30-1. My man had 14 boards and is the leader in the series after game 1. He is a 6'5" power forward, dude, and he's just going up there and grabbing glass, and he was awesome in game 1. So we're at least at a good start at 31 for Josh Hart to lead the series in rebounds. It was a small play, it was a quarter unit play, but still very good start for Hart there. And on top of that, we want a short series. I think we can get a short series. I know that a lot of people that I respect like the over in that game as well, but Hart to lead the series of rebounds at 30-1 pending. Nuggets, Timberwolves over 5.5 games, minus 135. And then Raptors, Cavs under 5.5 games at minus 110. Decent start for the series bets. We'll see. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but Nuggets and Timberwolves, I do think you're a little worried potentially about the health of Anthony Edwards, only because if he's not fully healthy and that is the ant we get defensively, then that is going to be potentially a short series for Denver, and then you can overcome the absence of Peyton Watson, which it does seem, reading between the lines, that maybe his absence will extend much farther into the series, maybe the entirety of the series. Depends on the length, depends on what happens as well, but really big there. Let's talk about some of the series that we're not going to see tonight, specifically, and a big thanks to Ryan Hollins, who was with us a little bit earlier, former Los Angeles Clipper on the Rockets TV team as well. Lakers and Rockets, we are still waiting word on what's going to happen with Kevin Durant. He was, I think, a surprise scratch for the most part. I was surprised when he was officially ruled out. It was a knee injury during the week. What is interesting here is the wording around this. Market seems to be hedging a little bit in the direction of KD potentially being available for Game 2. Number is 4.5. The total is 205.5. But there's a couple of things here worth pointing out. One of which is, from a series leader standpoint, we did discuss this. Reed Shepherd was even money to lead the series in three-point makes. He made 5. He's tied with the series lead with Luke Kennard, who was 5 for 5 in that first game. But the other is, how does this Rockets offense going to look again against the Lakers. And it's the old the Family Guy bit, right, with Spider-Man. Everybody gets one. The Lakers, I think, only needed one to potentially extend this series out enough to get one of their two guys back in terms of reinforcements. It's a bad loss for Houston after the way they dropped that game. And there's a couple of things that aren't going away. First off, even with Kevin Durant out there on the floor, the Rockets still have some very big questions about their half-court offense. And we could talk about KD really helping it out. And yes, he makes their half-court offense a little bit more efficient. But go back to when these two teams played in Houston near the end of the regular season. The half-court offense melted down. The Rockets couldn't do anything offensively. They blow the game against Los Angeles. They asked Kevin Durant to help their half-court offense by running the offense in the fourth quarter of that contest. It did really nothing to really improve it. And while KD, when he's on the floor, improves their half-court offense by 6.3 points every 100 possessions, in those possessions, they still rank in the 68th percentile of half-court offense. So, yes, Kevin Durant is a big piece to be added back to the fold, but he still makes them barely an above-average half-court group. You still have Shepherd and what they're going to do with him defensively. He is, effort-wise, not going to get lost, but he is still a smallish defender that can't shut anybody down. They're going to pick on him in a very big way. Redick's really smart to do that. So you do wonder how dangerous this is for Houston. Adjusted series price right now, still about a $2 favorite to win this thing against the Los Angeles Lakers, plus 180 coming back on LA. But I think you are somewhat worried here if you're Houston, and pour one out for my thought that the Portland Trailblazers and San Antonio Spurs was going to be a competitive series. Trailblazers did tie the game in the third quarter last night, but ultimately pulled away. San Antonio did. They are prohibitive favorites there, about minus 4,000, 18-1 on the comeback for Portland in that set. Just got to figure out what you're going to do on offense. Portland really had nothing, and they tried some unique things on defense. Ultimately did not work against Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. And how about this? I talked about this with our guy Andy and Will on Sunday when I joined them on Live Bet Sunday in the morning. Detroit, I think, is in some trouble. We had talked about this all year long. Mitch Moss, who's about to take over the desk right now, and I talked about this on Pod to the Futures. He asked me about drawing lines through teams, and Detroit was one of the teams that I drew a line through in the Eastern Conference. You saw every bit of the downside of Detroit in that set against Orlando. They are a one-man machine on offense. Jalen Duren was non-existent. They don't have another perimeter creator. And when you run into a team like Orlando that's got a bunch of bodies that they feel comfortable throwing in one-on-one matchups with a guy like Cade Cunningham, you're going to be in for a grind of a series. And if this is going to be a set in which you have to get taken to 6 or 7 games, and then Cleveland is fresh and ready to go after 4 or 5, don't like Detroit's chances. All right, follow the money. Coming up next, I know Mitch is in a good mood, hit a pretty good future. He'll tell you what that is, I'm sure, when the guys take over. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great slate of guests, so don't miss it. You go to vsin.com or check us out wherever you get your podcasts to find out anything you missed. We'll see you tomorrow.